You know that feeling when you look in the mirror and sense someone looking back who isn't quite you anymore. That unsettling recognition that something inside you is changing, and you can't stop it even if you wanted to. That discomfort you're feeling, it isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's proof that something is finally becoming right. There's a peculiar ache that comes with truly seeing yourself. Not the version you present to the world, not the character you've been playing in your own life story, but the raw, unfiltered presence beneath all your carefully constructed layers. This ache doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly, usually in those between moments when you're washing dishes and suddenly feel the weight of a question you've been avoiding, or when you're driving home and realize the person you were 5 years ago wouldn't recognize the person gripping the steering wheel. Self-discovery feels uncomfortable because it requires you to become a stranger to yourself before you can become yourself again. Think about it. You've spent years building an identity. Brick by brick, story by story, wound by wound, you've constructed a self that knows how to navigate the world. You've learned which masks to wear to which occasions. You've memorized the scripts that keep you safe, loved, accepted. You've created a comfortable prison of predictability. And somewhere along the way, you started calling that prison me. And then one day, something shifts. Maybe it's a loss that breaks you open. Maybe it's a moment of unexpected joy that reveals how numb you've become to aliveness. Maybe it's simply exhaustion the bone, deep tiredness of maintaining a performance you never auditioned for. Whatever the catalyst, you begin to see the walls of your own construction. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. This is where the discomfort begins. Not in the discovery itself, but in what discovery demands of you. Self-discovery asks you to question everything you thought you knew about who you are. It asks you to hold your beliefs up to the light and examine them honestly. Where did this come from? Is this actually mine? Or did I inherit it? Am I living this value or performing it? The questions don't stop. They multiply, echoing through every corner of your constructed self, and each echo loosens another brick. There's a Sufi teaching that says before truth can enter, the house must be emptied. But we don't want to empty the house. We've spent so long filling it, arranging the furniture just so, hanging pictures on every wall. We've turned our inner world into a museum of who we think we should be. And now self-discovery walks in with a broom and asks us to start sweeping. No wonder it feels uncomfortable. You're not just learning about yourself, you're unlearning the self you worked so hard to become. Here's what makes this process even more disorienting. The world around you doesn't stop moving while you're falling apart. Your job still demands your attention. Your relationships still require your presence. Bills still need to be paid. Responsibilities still press against your chest. You're expected to function normally while experiencing an internal earthquake. And nobody around you can see the ground shaking beneath your feet. This is the loneliness of transformation. You can be surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone in the questions that consume you. Because the questions you're asking, who am I beneath what I do? What do I actually want versus what I've been taught to want? Why do I feel so disconnected from the life I've built? These questions don't have Google-able answers. They don't resolve in a weekend workshop or a 10-day meditation retreat. They demand time, patience, and a willingness to sit with not, knowing that our achievement-oriented culture never prepared us for. The ego hates this process. The ego is that voice in your head that's terrified of uncertainty, that needs to be right, that measures your worth by external validation. The ego built your current identity, and it will fight like hell to protect it, because to the ego, change feels like death. And in a way, it is. Parts of you must die for new parts to emerge. Old stories must dissolve before truer ones can take shape. The person you were must become compost for the person you're becoming. But here's what the ego doesn't understand. This death is not an ending. It's a door. Every moment of discomfort in self-discovery is an invitation. It's life asking you, are you ready to meet yourself without your armor? Can you sit with the parts of yourself you've been hiding? Will you love yourself enough to let yourself change? These aren't comfortable questions. Comfortable questions have comfortable answers. These questions strip you bare. They ask you to be vulnerable with yourself in ways you've perhaps never been vulnerable with anyone else. They require a kind of courage that doesn't look heroic from the outside, the courage to admit you don't have it all figured out, the courage to say, I don't know who I am anymore, the courage to choose truth over comfort. And here's the paradox that makes all of this even more uncomfortable. The discomfort itself is the path. You can't think your way out of it. You can't strategize your way through it. You can't manifest or affirm your way around it. You have to feel it. You have to walk directly into the center of your own uncertainty and learn to breathe there. This is why self-discovery feels so uncomfortable, because it is. Because it must be. Because anything worth finding is hidden in the places you've been avoiding. Because the truth about who you are lives on the other side of everything you've been pretending to be. And the only way out is through. Let's talk about why we run from ourselves. Because that's really what this discomfort is about, isn't it? Not the journey of self-discovery itself, but our resistance to it. We've become masters of avoidance, artists of distraction, experts in building elaborate lives that keep us too busy to look inward. Watch yourself for a day. Really watch. Notice how many times you reach for your phone when silence threatens to settle in. Count the moments you fill with noise podcasts, music, television, scrolling anything to avoid hearing your own thoughts. Observe how you schedule yourself into exhaustion, as if business is a virtue and stillness is something to be conquered. We've turned distraction into a lifestyle and called it productivity. But underneath all this motion, there's a quiet voice asking questions you don't want to answer. The discomfort of self-discovery intensifies because we've built our entire lives around not feeling it. We've constructed identities designed for external consumption. We've learned to perform happiness, to project success, to curate versions of ourselves that earn approval. Somewhere in that performance, we lost touch with the performer. We became so skilled at showing others what they wanted to see that we forgot to check if anyone was actually home inside. There's an old Zen story about a man who spent his entire life searching for a precious jewel. He traveled to distant lands, climbed dangerous mountains, crossed vast oceans, always seeking this treasure he'd heard about since childhood. After decades of searching, exhausted and empty-handed, he returned home, and there, in the pocket of the coat he'd worn on the first day of his journey, he found the jewel. It had been with him all along. This is the cosmic joke of self-discovery. What you're seeking isn't somewhere out there, waiting to be found. It's here. It's been here. You've just been looking everywhere except where you actually are. But looking where you actually are means facing what you've been running from. And what are we running from? Not monsters or demons or external threats. We're running from silence, from stillness, from the raw, unadorned experience of simply existing without a story to explain it. We're running from the parts of ourselves we've judged as unworthy, the anger we've suppressed, the grief we've postponed, the desires we've deemed inappropriate, the dreams we've called unrealistic. We're running from our own humanity. The ego doesn't want you to discover this. The ego wants you to believe you need more achievement, more validation, more proof of your worthiness. It tells you that once you reach the next milestone, earn the next promotion, find the perfect relationship, then you'll feel complete, then you can rest, then you can finally be yourself. But that moment never comes because the ego's job is to keep you chasing. As long as you're chasing something external, you're not looking internal. And if you're not looking internal, the ego remains in control. This is why self-discovery feels threatening. It threatens the ego's authority. It questions the validity of every story you've told yourself about who you are and what you need to be happy. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, you've been looking for yourself in all the wrong places. The discomfort deepens when you realize how much energy you've invested in maintaining a false self. Think about it. How much of your day is spent managing other people's perceptions of you? How many decisions do you make based on what others might think rather than what you actually want? How often do you silence your own voice to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to maintain an image? We become so practiced at abandoning ourselves that we don't even notice we're doing it anymore. It becomes second nature. We check our authenticity at the door of every social situation, every professional environment, sometimes even every personal relationship. We fragment ourselves into acceptable pieces and wonder why we feel so scattered, so exhausted, so fundamentally disconnected from our own lives. And then self-discovery comes along and says, bring all those pieces back. Collect yourself. Come home. But home doesn't look like you thought it would. Home is messier than the image you projected. Home contains contradictions. You're strong and vulnerable, confident and uncertain, clear and confused, all at the same time. Home means accepting that you're a work in progress, not a finished product. Home means embracing the full spectrum of your humanity, not just the parts that earn applause. This acceptance is uncomfortable because it goes against everything you've been taught. You've been taught to have it all together, to know what you want, to present a coherent narrative of your life. You've been taught that consistency is a virtue and change is weakness. You've been taught to be reliable, predictable, understood. But real self-discovery reveals that you're none of these things. You're dynamic, evolving, mysterious even to yourself. You contain multitudes. You're allowed to change your mind, to grow beyond your past decisions, to become someone different than who you were yesterday. This isn't inconsistency, it's aliveness. The discomfort you feel is the friction between who you've been pretending to be and who you actually are. It's the tension between the life you've constructed and the life that wants to be lived through you. It's the growing awareness that you've been playing a role in a story someone else wrote, and you're finally ready to pick up the pen. But picking up the pen means taking responsibility. It means you can no longer blame your circumstances, your past, your parents, your culture, your limitations for the life you're living. It means acknowledging that you've had more power than you admitted, more choice than you claimed, more agency than you've been willing to own. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable realization of all. You could have chosen differently all along. You still can. And now that you know this, what will you do? Here's what no one tells you about self-discovery. The uncomfortable feelings aren't obstacles to overcome. They're the path itself. Every moment of unease is a signpost pointing toward something that needs your attention. Every flash of discomfort is a teacher waiting to reveal what you've been hiding from yourself. We've been taught to smooth over discomfort, to fix it, to make it go away as quickly as possible. Feeling anxious, take something. Feeling sad, distract yourself. Feeling uncertain, make a plan. We've turned comfort into a goal and discomfort into a problem that needs solving. But what if discomfort isn't the problem? What if it's the doorway? There's an ancient practice in some wisdom traditions of sitting with your pain without trying to change it. Not dwelling in it, not dramatizing it, but simply allowing it to be present. Just witnessing it with the same patient attention you might give to a sunset or a piece of music. What happens when you do this is remarkable. The pain doesn't intensify as you feared it might. It begins to reveal its message. Every uncomfortable emotion carries information. Your anxiety is trying to tell you something about misalignment. Perhaps you're living someone else's values. Perhaps you're ignoring your intuition. Perhaps you're overriding your boundaries to please others. Your sadness is pointing to what matters to you, to losses you haven't grieved, to dreams you've abandoned. Your anger is showing you where you've allowed yourself to be diminished, where injustice lies, where you need to speak up or walk away. But we don't listen. We medicate, distract, analyze, or dismiss. We do anything except sit still and ask, what are you trying to show me? Self-discovery feels uncomfortable because it requires you to befriend these inner messengers you've been treating as enemies. It asks you to get curious about your pain rather than afraid of it. It invites you to see your struggles not as evidence of your brokenness, but as evidence of your wholeness trying to emerge. Think about a seed underground. Before it breaks through the surface, it must break open completely. The shell that protected it must crack. Everything it was must fall away so that what it's meant to become can emerge. If the seed could speak, it might call this process uncomfortable. It might even call it dying. But what's actually happening is birth. You are that seed. And the darkness you're in, the uncertainty, the discomfort, the feeling of falling apart, this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your becoming. But here's where we get tripped up. We want transformation without transition. We want to discover ourselves without disturbing the life we've built. We want to grow without the growing pains. We want the wisdom without walking through the wilderness that teaches it. It doesn't work that way. Wisdom is earned, not learned. You can read 1,000 books about self-discovery and still not know yourself. You can attend every workshop, follow every teacher, practice every technique, and still feel lost. Because self-discovery isn't an intellectual exercise. It's not information you acquire. It's experience you surrender to. And real surrender, is profoundly uncomfortable for the ego. The ego wants control. It wants to manage the process, to set the pace, to determine the outcome. But self-discovery operates on its own timeline. It has its own rhythm. It doesn't care about your schedule or your 5-year plan. It will crack you open exactly when you need to be cracked open, not when it's convenient. This is why people often report that their deepest growth came from their darkest moments. The job loss that forced them to reconsider their path. The heartbreak that taught them what they actually need in relationship. The illness that made them reassess their priorities. The crisis that stripped away everything unnecessary and revealed what was essential. We don't pray for these moments. We fear them. But in retrospect, we often recognize them as the moments that saved us from lives that were slowly suffocating us. There's a Sufi concept called the crushing of the grapes. The grape must be crushed to become wine. The transformation is violent. The grape doesn't emerge intact. On the other side, it becomes something entirely new, something richer, something capable of bringing joy and altering consciousness. But it must be willing to be crushed. Your discomfort is the crushing. Your old self, with all its certainties and defenses and carefully maintained stories, is being pressed. And what's emerging is your essence, the part of you that was there before you learned to perform, before you accumulated wounds, before you started building walls around your heart. This essence has always been there, waiting patiently beneath the layers of conditioning. It's been whispering to you in moments of intuition, in dreams, in those rare times when you felt truly yourself. Self-discovery is simply the process of clearing away everything that's covering this essence, everything that's muting its voice. And yes, that clearing is uncomfortable, because it means releasing attachment to things you thought defined you. It means letting go of relationships that no longer serve your growth. It means changing patterns that have been keeping you small but safe. It means stepping into a bigger version of yourself before you feel ready, before you have all the answers, before you know how it will all work out. But here's the secret hidden in the discomfort. On the other side of it is freedom. Not the freedom of having no responsibilities or constraints, but the freedom of being exactly who you are without apology. The freedom of living from your center instead of your circumference. The freedom of making choices based on your truth rather than others' expectations. This freedom isn't comfortable either. It's too alive for that, too real, too raw. But it's yours, and once you taste it, you'll understand why the journey through discomfort was worth every difficult step. The wound is where the light enters. Your discomfort is the crack that's letting your true self finally break through. So what do you do with all this discomfort? How do you actually navigate the messy, uncertain, often overwhelming process of discovering who you are beneath who you've been? You start by changing your relationship to the discomfort itself. instead of seeing it as a sign that something's wrong. You begin to recognize it as a sign that something's awakening. You stop fighting it and start being curious about it. You ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Where in my life am I out of alignment? What part of me is ready to evolve? This shift in perspective doesn't make the discomfort disappear, but it transforms its meaning. It stops being something to endure and becomes something to explore. You become an archaeologist of your own inner world, carefully brushing away layers of conditioning to reveal what's been buried beneath. Here's a practice so simple it sounds almost too easy. Pause, just pause. Throughout your day, in those moments when you reach for distraction or rush to the next thing, stop. Take 3 conscious breaths. Ask yourself, where am I right now? Not physically, where am I emotionally, mentally, spiritually? You might be surprised by how often you're anywhere but present, how often you're rehearsing the past or anticipating the future, how rarely you're actually here. Self-discovery happens in these pauses. It happens in the space between the stimulus and your automatic response. It happens when you catch yourself about to put on a mask and instead ask, what would happen if I showed up as I actually am right now? It happens when you notice you're performing and choose, just for a moment, to stop performing and simply be. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You don't need to quit your job, end your relationships, or move to a mountaintop to find yourself. You need to become present to the life you're already living and honest about how it feels. Does this relationship nourish me or drain me? Does this work align with my values or contradict them? Am I making this choice from fear or from love? Am I living my life or living out someone else's script? These questions don't always have comfortable answers. Sometimes the honest answer is, I'm living out of alignment and changing that will require difficult conversations and scary decisions. But you know what's more uncomfortable than facing these truths? Spending another 5, 10, 20 years avoiding them. Waking up one day and realizing you've lived someone else's life while your own life waited patiently in the wings. There's a practice in some contemplative traditions of simply watching your thoughts without engaging with them. Imagine sitting by a river, watching leaves float by on the surface. Each leaf is a thought. You don't grab the leaves. You don't follow them downstream. You just watch them pass. This practice teaches you that you are not your thoughts. You're the awareness that watches them. You're the space in which they arise and dissolve. This realization alone can ease so much discomfort. Because if you're not your thoughts, then you're also not your anxiety, your depression, your anger, your fear. These are experiences moving through you, not definitions of who you are. They're weather patterns in the sky of your consciousness, and like weather, they change. What remains constant is the sky itself, your fundamental awareness, your essential being. You're learning to distinguish between your true self and your conditioned self. Your true self is spacious, curious, compassionate. It doesn't need to defend itself because it knows it's already whole. Your conditioned self is the collection of beliefs, patterns, and protective mechanisms you've accumulated over a lifetime. It's not bad it served a purpose. It kept you safe. But it's not the totality of who you are. Self-discovery is the process of loosening your identification with the conditioned self so your true self can breathe. And here's what's beautiful: your true self isn't something you need to create or achieve or become. It's already here. It's been here all along. You don't need to build a better self. You need to clear away the layers of false selves you've constructed. You don't need to find yourself. You need to stop losing yourself in other people's definitions, expectations, and judgments. This is why self-discovery ultimately leads to a profound sense of coming home. You're not traveling somewhere foreign. You're returning to a place you've always belonged. You're remembering what you've always known. You're becoming who you've always been, underneath everything you thought you had to be. The discomfort begins to ease when you realize you're not alone in this journey. Every person you meet is also walking this path, even if they're not conscious of it. Every human being is trying to reconcile who they are with who they think they should be. We're all carrying masks, all protecting wounds, all longing for permission to be ourselves. When you start showing up authentically, you give others permission to do the same. Your self-discovery becomes an invitation for others to discover themselves. And isn't that what we're all really longing for? Not perfection, not having it all figured out, but connection, real connection. The kind that happens when two people drop their pretenses and meet each other in the raw, vulnerable, imperfect truth of who they actually are. The kind where you can say, I don't know who I am anymore. And instead of trying to fix you, someone says, me neither. Let's figure it out together. So yes, self-discovery feels uncomfortable. It will continue to feel uncomfortable. There will be days when you want to return to the familiar prison of your old identity. When you miss the simplicity of not questioning everything. When you wish you could unknow what you now know. But you can't go back. And somewhere deep inside, you don't want to. Because as uncomfortable as this journey is, it's also the most honest thing you've ever done. It's the most courageous. It's the most real. You're finally meeting yourself. And that meeting, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of the only love affair that will last your entire life, the one with your own soul. Welcome home.